Good afternoon to you all. Thank you for joining today's episode of the Tech Talk Show with me, Kazim. So you're welcome to today's episode of the show. And on today's episode, today's topic is planning and managing cost on Azure. And I have Mustafa Toroman with me on the show today to walk us through today's topic. You're very much welcome on the show, Mustafa.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Quickly, Mustafa, let's meet you. Let's know who you are, and then we can delve right in.
Okay, so I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I've worked as a solution architect for a company of 30 partners. It's an American company, and for the last few years, I've been working mainly with US companies in fintech. Also, most of those clients I've worked with in the past were Fortune 500 companies. So these sort of things like planning and cost optimization and knowing the budget is very important to them. So this is something I had to pay attention very much. Also, okay. I'm Azure MVP for the last 5 years or so. So that's it.
So you're welcome again on the show. So let's jump right in, Mustafa. Let's begin with why is planning and managing cost on Azure? Why is it an important topic, Mustafa?
Oh, well, because first of all, it's kind of hard to define where to start with that, but it's something that easily can get out of hand. And if you're not careful about it, it can escalate out of the proportion easily. So the cloud in general is opportunity to do the optimization, the cost savings, and so on. But if you're not really careful on how you approach it, and if you're not planning things properly, the final bill may very well exceed your expectations very, 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 very easily.
Okay. So people listening right now would like to know, I want them to know what billing is like on Azure. I don't want us to assume now. So what are the different billing types on Azure, and what's the difference between the different Azure billing types?
So basically, first stuff that we have to separate is the subscription level and how you can manage those. So basically, most popular subscription is definitely a pay-as-you-go option, where you just like swipe in your card at the registration and you're billed for your resources at the end of the month. But it's very important to understand that there are different subscription types as well. There's option to do a prepaid, where you have like a limited budget upfront, where you decide, okay, for this year, I want to buy this much of Azure credits, and I'm going to spend them for this year, or it can be a month or anything else. But about that one, you have to be really careful, because if you overestimate, and let's say you want to spend 10,000 for this month and you're not spending them, those credits are going to expire. So you need to be careful on how you're actually planning that one. And there's also an option for enterprise subscription, where you're not billed per month, but you are signing a contract for a year term, and you're like committing to spend certain amount of resources, but everything is basically billed annually based on your usage. But it's also once we are like past the subscription part, because as I said, like 90% or even more are going to use pay-as-you-go, and it's most popular one. But once we're past the subscription type, and this second part goes for all the subscription types, is the type of resources. So most of the things that we have in Azure are billed per minute usage. So basically, most of the things that we're like, especially when it comes to computing, are billed on per minute basis. So if you're using something for 7 minutes, we're going to be billed for 7 minutes, and that's basically it. But there are also like consistent services that we pay for like entire month or pay on a daily usage or things like that. And those are also things that we actually need to take into account as well. So for example, there are most of the cloud journeys for a lot of companies, especially when we're talking about the enterprise, is starting with the infrastructure as a service, like moving a couple of your virtual machines from on-prem environment to cloud. And there are a couple of things that we need to take into account in situation like that. So by building a virtual machine, we can predict the cost of that virtual machine. We need to plan how much we probably want to know how much it's going to cost us at the end of the month to run that virtual machine. But if you're using Azure pricing calculator, it's going to tell us only extent of the information on usage. So basically, virtual machine price, the one that we see when we are creating virtual machine, is just for compute hours. So basically, if that virtual machine is running 24/7 for a full month, that price is basically what we need to pay for the computing. But there are additional costs connected to that virtual machine. Besides the compute hours, we also have things like networking, IP addresses, storage, and those are also things that we need to take into account. So now the computing part is built on per minute basis. So basically, if we spin up virtual machine, use it for a couple of hours and shut it down, we're only going to pay the compute hours for those couple of hours that we are actually have been using it. Once we shut it down, we are not anymore billed for the compute hours. But there are things like storage that's kind of persistent thing. So basically, that virtual machine is going to have disks that are going to store some sort of data on it. And basically, once we shut down the virtual machine, the disks are persistent and they're going to stay. So we're going to pay full month for those disks, no matter if you're using virtual machine or not. If it's shut down, we're not paying for the compute part, but we're paying for the disk. So storage is kind of a different service, and it's different how we bill it, because there's no computing hours attached to the storage. We are basically paying for a month of a service based on the amount of data that we're storing in Azure. Another thing that we need to look at is also network bandwidth. So basically, that's also something that is not pre-calculated in those virtual machines, but it's also something that needs to be accounted for. So basically, based on the outbound traffic in Azure, because it's maybe important to mention that inbound data, so all data that is coming into Azure is not billed, but we're only paying for the outbound data. So that's also going to create a certain amount of billing to occur on at the end of the month. It's not to that extent, but it's also something that's important to account for. Now there are additional services, like for example, there's a public IP addresses that if we want to reserve a public IP address, static IP address, that's going to be like, I don't know, like $3 per month or something per IP address. It's still much cheaper than you're probably going to pay any ISP for the public IP address. So it's a good deal, but it's something that you need to account for. If you have a huge number of IP addresses, public IP addresses, it can increase your bill at the end of the month. So there are those different kind of services. Most of the services, and especially those one that has some compute power attached to it, are billed per minute. But there are also services that we pay on per use basis, per traffic basis in network sense, and there are services like storage or maybe Azure Firewall that we pay for a full month, no matter if you use it or not.
Okay, thank you for the response, Mustafa. So next, if we want to see if there is a particular service on Azure that's on our Azure tenant now that is consuming the most cost, is there a way on Azure, on the Azure portal, for us to see this? And what tool do we use? What tool can we use to peep into this?
Okay, so there are a couple of things we need to look at it. For example, billing is quite different if you're using pay-as-you-go option and enterprise subscription, because enterprise subscription has a separate Azure billing portal, and there you can have some very extensive reports and a lot of information. When it comes to regular pay-as-you-go subscription, there are a lot of billing information directly attached on the subscription level. In the Azure portal, you can get a lot of those information. There are also a couple of tools that can help us. In the past, Microsoft had a Cloud-in license to everyone for free. I think that's expiring relatively soon, and we will not be able to use it, unfortunately, anymore. But in the meantime, Microsoft built their own solution about billing, and we have Azure Cost Management that can help us to track down the usage, to see how much are we using, on what are we using it, to have details report, and even to get a recommendations if there are some resources that are overutilized. So basically, if you have a huge virtual machine that isn't like utilized, its utilization is less than 50%, it's recommending us to size it down to save on cost and things like that.
Okay. Thank you. So we can say that's more of cost analysis now, taking a look at what has happened in the past. So now peeping into the future, you've mentioned the ACM, the Azure Cost Management. I know, yes, the Azure Cost Management help us to do a lot of things, but let's start with budgeting now. How does budgeting work on the Azure Cost Management? Is this something that is done at the subscription level, or can you really get very granular, with the ACM?
It's actually associated to the role-based access controls. So basically, you can get more granular with it, and you can on different you can tie it to different options. One thing that we also might want to mention when we're discussing cost and billing and monitoring what's going on inside your subscription, and especially in the cost saving terms, is tags. So tags are really useful thing that can help us a lot to track down what this specific resource is attached to. So definitely inside the subscription, we have resource groups that can like use to certain organization on how we are going to like structure our resources. But in many cases, applications or departments are going to exceed those resource groups. They're going to need like it's really possible that single application is going to have like I don't know, 3 different resource groups for maybe 3 environments. They're going to have resource group for production, for UAT, for dev, and tracking a single resource group is not telling us anymore on how much this specific application is costing, because we maybe are monitoring production, but there are 2 other environments that are directly tied to the same application. I mean, like from the cost perspective, we're going to watch it the same way. Similar thing goes, some organizations like to track things through the departments, and the single departments is going to have multiple applications, multiple environments, and so on. So similar thing can be applied there. We don't want to watch the single resource group to actually tell us how much this department is spending. We need something more. What we can use basically to attach either to resource groups or to each individual resource, we can attach tags. And tags can give us more insight on basically how much this application or this department is spending. And we can use a similar approach with the application cost management. We can basically budget the departments and say, okay, this department has this much money for this month, and they cannot exceed that.
Okay. I was just going to come to that can we have a budget more like a quota, a budget quota, to ensure that we don't overshoot our limits now, that exceed our limits. If we have the limit be a certain amount, something to ensure that we don't exceed that? Is that possible? Is that something that is possible?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's a similar approach to something Microsoft has, like sponsor subscriptions, where you have a kind of limit on that, like MSDN subscriptions and that sort of type for Azure. So basically, if you have any type of MSDN license, you have between $50 and $150 per month to spend on Azure services. And once you like reach that limit, you're shut down. Your services are going to start shutting down and you won't be able to use them. So in this case, it doesn't really have to be that extreme. We probably don't want department to stop working totally, but we can receive alerts and metrics that will tell us, okay, their budget is like, it also, besides getting the alerts, it helps us to keep track and predict stuff. Because if we like budget certain department with, I don't know, 5,000 and they spend it like in first 5 days, they already spent 8. it's a kind of a red mark, and we are going to get a notification and say, okay, they are exceeding, and then it gives us opportunity to plan and discuss what are the further steps.
Okay. I also know that on the ACM we have the advisor recommendation, for cost optimization now. How does this work? What does it do and how does it work?
So basically what cost optimization does, it analyzes your utilization and then gives you certain recommendations on how you can increase your efficiency. So basically, I think I already mentioned it, but if we have a certain type of resource that is underutilized, like not using its full capacity, we're going to receive the information that we need to decrease it, because right now it's not being used enough. Same thing can be like, there are a lot of little things that can be like, it's going to suggest to us that we are not using certain resources at all, that are basically maybe created and no one is using them. We are also going to get information like, for example, if we have a Azure SQL database, Azure SQL database can be priced in few different ways. One of them is per database option, where we pay a certain amount for each database, but there's also option for the pool capacity, where we have a pool of databases, and they have we are paying for the pool no matter how many databases are in it. And basically, again, on the type of utilization during the day and that sort of thing, we might get a recommendation that it's better for us if you like have 5 different databases that are not utilized enough, that we might want to switch to the pool and pay less in that certain way. So it's basically analyzing resources that we're using, their utilization, and it's basically giving us recommendations on how much we can save.
Okay. For the AWS integration that we have with the Azure Cost Management, is this something that comes free of charge, or is something that we have to pay for?
To be honest, I didn't pay with AWS still. I did some work completely about AWS, but in terms of cost management, I didn't play with AWS. So I didn't check it out. So I can check it out, and if anyone is interested, they can pick me and I can provide information. But right now, I'm not sure about it.
Oh, okay. So I like to think it's free. It's a free service that Microsoft just built into the ACM that we can leverage to also get billing information about. Yes, for free.
They're giving us a lot of free stuff.
Yes,
it's probably true.
Yes, and also earlier on you mentioned the clouding, right? So how does clouding compares now to the Azure Cost Management? And if we have people still using clouding, what would you recommend, them to do? Should they continue to stick with clouding, or should they just look at migrating to Azure Cost Management now?
Okay, so it really depends. Cloudin is really good solution, and it was basically for a long time only solution. Microsoft had cut the deal with them to provide free license for all Azure users, and for a time we had an opportunity to use it and see its full potential. So it's really good tool. Cloudin is also not limited to only Azure. With Cloudin, you can do basically any cloud provider you want, and it gives you a lot of good metrics and good information that can like help you a lot. Azure Cost Management is also a good solution, but it doesn't go as deep as Cloudin does. So basically, it provides you with a lot of information. It's a really good tool. But if you're like used to a lot of little details that Cloudin provided, they are not present with in Azure Cost Management right now. So it really depends for you if that price for the Cloudin license is justified for you to provide you those certain metrics. To be honest, when I look at it, like this is just something Microsoft did to buy them some time to provide quality cost management solution, because at the time they didn't have any, and you basically were kind of you were kind of blind inside your Azure subscription. You were not totally in control. You couldn't track stuff and so on. So they cut a deal with Cloudin. They built their own solution, and they have something. And now this is only the beginning for the Azure Cost Management, like for the all Azure services and anything that we have in Azure. It's basically a daily change. We can see the services changing whenever we log in. Whenever we open Azure Portal, we're going to have that little window pop up in the right corner saying that this and this and this and this is new. So basically, we can see the changes. If you're using Azure Daily, we can see the changes happening daily. And similar thing can be expected for Azure Cost Management. This is only the beginning. We can expect that it's only going to get better in time. They're going to improve the product, and we are going to have everything that is in Cloudin in some time, and even maybe more. So it's basically, in my opinion, it's really good. You get it for free, so I would definitely recommend it. If you want more for the time being, you still need to stick with the Cloudin, but I predict there will be a moment in time really soon into the future where there will be actually nothing that Cloudin is providing over Azure Cost Management.
Okay. Very well then. So before we say bye-bye on today's episode of the show, could you please, Mustafa, help us connect the dots now by showing us a few things within the Azure portal with regard to the ACM?
Let me just pop my Azure portal and let's go. Okay, so one second, let me share my screen. And which one is it? Hopefully is this one. Tell me, if you can see my screen?
Yes, it's live now.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So, okay, let's pop up to my subscription level, for example. And like, we have a cost management option here. So we have a couple of different things here on the subscription level. It will provide us with certain cost analysis. It will predict, like we have a tracking on how much we spent until this day in the month. And it's also telling us what is our forecast for the full month. So we can track it over time and see what is predicted, what are the analysis, and how much money we will spend at the end of the month on this subscription based on our current usage and based on resources we are using right now. If we like delete certain resources or add certain resources, we're going to get recalculation and new projection. We can also track different things like service names, what is the cost based on different locations, based on, let me pop this down, based on resource groups and those sort of things. We can also create our custom reports, custom analysis based on, as we mentioned before, on departments, on different tags and so This is the thing we actually discussed. I don't actually have any right now, but we can create the budgets and say, we can say what is, okay, we can define the name of the budget. We can set what is the billing period for month, for quarter, for the year. We can say when it is starting and when it is ending, what is the amount, and then it will provide us the information to track down what are the current usage and what is the track of the current budget we created. And probably the most important thing about this is definitely advice recommendation. So a part of this giving us information about our resources and giving us some kind of control with the budget and stuff, recommendations, and from some reason I didn't get any postponed. Let's see. It appears that my subscription is pretty optimized right now, so it's not providing me. Let's try on the different level. So let's try to go with the resource groups. For example, let's do this one. And let's say we have, like, we already see it in the subscription level. We can see the similar thing on the resource group level. So basically we have all those options. We have cost analysis, we have budget, we have advice recommendations, but there's also something new. And we can see that this one is in preview. We have cost alerts. So we can create a budget for this specific resource group and then receive notifications in case we are exceeding budget and that sort of thing. Let's check the recommendations. If unfortunately none. As I said, it appears that my that I already applied all advisor recommendations, and I'm pretty optimized and paying only for what I need. But as I mentioned before, in case that I have some underutilized resources and something like that, I would get those notifications here, and it will tell me, I don't know what kind of resources I have here. Like I have app service plan, I have a virtual machine, I have Azure SQL database. Cost management would track down all my resources, and based on their utilization over time and their spikes, it will give me a recommendation to resize or change tier for certain resources, so I could actually save some money.
So thank you again for coming on the show today. So you've heard it now from Mustafa. So we know cost management is something that is really very important, especially now, during our COVID time now. So it's very, very important that we put it to good use. It's going to help us derive optimum value, from our cloud service subscription. And it's also going to be able to help us with things like sharing with our stakeholders now. Sometimes our stakeholders want to know, they want to be in the know with regards to utilization of our cloud services. So we can really rely on the Azure cost management to help with all of those. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Mustafa, and for everyone, thank you so much for joining today's episode of the show. So let's do this again next week, and let's continue to keep safe. Thank you very much, and until this time next week again, bye-bye.
Thank you for having me, and thanks everyone for joining in. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.